Hello, this is Ryan again, and today I'll be talking about whether standardized tests like the SAT and ACT are worthwhile. We've been hearing it for years. Does taking the SAT and ACT really evaluate the student's knowledge capacity or just their ability to display their test taking abilities? This topic was chosen by myself because the University of California system has recently been deciding whether or not to drop the requirement for admission by submitting SAT and ACT scores. There are many arguments for both sides of the equation and arguments that are extremely interesting. The side on why the standardized tests should stay and be maintained goes on and on with reasons. People for it say that colleges need some sort of broad yardstick to compare students across disparate school districts and states. And at large colleges, getting rid of this test would mean revising the whole mechanism for admissions, retraining admissions officers, redoing applications, and rethinking an entire methodology. The tests provide important information beyond assessing achievement. Some studies have shown that SAT and ACT scores combined with a student's grade point average and other factors can help predict a student's success in college, especially in the crucial first year. Also, in most cases, the SAT and ACT are a relatively low-cost way for disadvantaged students to demonstrate their preparedness for college, and the tests help schools identify talented students for low-income or minority backgrounds. However, with all those components, the case that I am making today is that SAT and ACT, along with other standardized tests, do not actually test the knowledge of the student at hand, rather how well people are trained and taught to take a test at a certain amount of time. The first argument that supports my first claim is the fact that people pay thousands of dollars to be tutored, not for the knowledge aspect, but tricks on how to do well on the test. Not to make it personal, but I myself was in a situation where I cannot afford a teacher to help tutor me for the SAT and ACT. However, I had friends with far lower GPAs in high school, paying a ton of money to learn the tricks and ways to take the test and how to do better, who received better scores than I did, but I felt and turns out I was way more prepared for college than those people. At that point, kids that are paying for teachers are realistically just receiving higher scores based on being taught how to maneuver around the test itself. Proponents of a change say it is fairer to judge students by other measures such as teacher recommendations. Some studies have suggested that high school grades are a better measure of a student's likelihood of graduation and cumulative performance in college. At the national level, researchers have found evidence that standardized test scores such as the SAT and ACT are worse predictors of a student's success in college than other measures, such as a high school GPA. High school GPAs generally capture the sorts of behaviors that students need to be successful in college, such as showing up to class and turning in assignments. By contrast, students' tests might measure how well students can cram before a high-stake exam but say a little bit about long-term study habits and work ethic. The SAT and ACT also made an appearance in last year's college admissions scandal. In October, a proctor pled guilty to fixing students' scores in exchange for bribes. While such explicit cheating is rare, the scandal furthered the perception that standardized tests are rigged in favor of rich students who can use their resources to secure better scores on the exams. The SAT was originally designed to be an aptitude test. An aptitude test is supposed to measure your natural ability and predict how well you'll do in college. The ACT, on the other hand, was designed to be an achievement test, a test whose purpose is to show you how much you have learned in the past. A popular dissenting argument is that the SAT and ACT do not measure aptitude or achievement at all. Instead, they just measure how well you've studied. Practice tests are found on both the SAT and ACT websites. SAT and ACT prep classes are often an option in many high schools. Tutoring and test prep is widely available both online and in person. And students are encouraged to take the SAT and ACT more than once to achieve their best possible scores. Because you have the opportunity to prepare specifically for what will be on the test, the more you study, the higher you score. There also seems to be a direct link between household income and test scores. According to data released by College Board, the average SAT scores increase along with family income. Test preparation has become a multi-billion-dollar business. According to a New York Times article, many New York City families will spend over $20,000 on SAT prep, and top tutors charge over $600 an hour. Families with higher incomes can afford to provide better resources and more resources for their children. These kids are much more likely to have a higher SAT scores merely because they have the ability to buy preparation. Another reason some argue that ACT and SAT should be abolished is because there are just too many inconsistencies in the tests. Both tests are given on an enormous scale not only across the US but internationally. Both testing companies have very strict testing procedures and test security measures, but it is impossible to know that all testing procedures and environments are completely equal. Issues have been reported by proctors and test centers across the country of timing errors, altered answer sheets, and cheating. According to the New York Times, the most recent college admissions scandal even provided an instruction manual for gaming the SAT, bribing the proctor, hire a stand-in, see the right psychologist to get a sign-off for more time. One other huge reason to support my claim is one that applies to myself and hits home. Some people naturally underperform on tests. Test anxiety is a real problem for some students. Anxiety actually affects the way that some students are able to understand, evaluate, and recall information. Some of these kids are great students, but just freeze up on tests. Test anxiety can be overcome, but it is definitely a greater challenge. There are other students who just have a bad testing day. Circumstances in their personal lives or even events on the way to the testing center can throw off their focus. These students may not be able to take the SAT or the ACT more than once due to financial issues. At the end of the day, I think that the SAT and ACT are able to eventually become 100% optional at all universities because not only does it not accurately measure the knowledge of students, but there are many flaws that reside with them. Thank you.